Wilf Mbanga is the founder as well as the editor of the Zimbabwean news portal. He joins us now from Mauritius. Wilf, thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. Now, you at one point were declared an enemy of the state, an enemy of the people. You spent 15 years in exile. How will you remember Robert Mugabe?
I've got mixed feelings about him. I remember the very first time I met him in 1974 when he had just been released from prison. And he was talking of a Zimbabwe where there would be no racial discrimination, a Zimbabwe where the winners would not take all and punish those who were our erstwhile enemies. And I remember him becoming Prime Minister in 1980. I watched him on television as he enunciated the policy of reconciliation, where he said, if yesterday you were my enemy, today we are bound together with one common destiny, and we should turn our souls into plowshares. And I remember him during those early years when he brought about education, and Zimbabweans became the most educated blacks on the African continent. He also was interested in agriculture. We became the breadbasket of Southern Africa. But at the same time, he had this iron fist on the country. You might recall the days, in the early 80s of Gukurahundi, where thousands of people in Matabeleland were massacred by the 5th Brigade. And at the same time, he was bringing about education for all, health for all, and so on. And the country was prospering. And then I also remember him in the end about how he oppressed the people. He became worse than the original oppressors, Ian Smith. Thousands of Zimbabweans were massacred by him. And millions of Zimbabweans now live in the diaspora, fleeing Mugabe's brutal tyranny. The economy of the country has been decimated. He has butchered his opponents, he's rigged elections, and mismanaged the economy. And this day, Zimbabweans are poorer today than they were in 1980.
Okay, I want to sort of get into where everything started to go wrong. You've said that Robert Mugabe was your friend. I actually read a line that you actually listened to country music together, so you do share a strong past. You've talked about Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe, where people are highly educated, there was healthcare for everybody, but you also talked about a Zimbabwe where he ruled the country with an iron fist. When do you think everything started to go sour?
A number of things happened. He lost his wife, Sally, who was a stabilizing person in his life. Then he married Grace, a young woman, 40 years his junior, who was very acquisitive. And she was obviously preparing for life after Mugabe. She wanted to make sure that she would not want for anything. And that was the turning point. And then, of course, you recall in 1978, Mugabe lost in a referendum, 99, lost in a referendum where he wanted to increase his powers. And the people of Zimbabwe rejected that. And he never forgave Zimbabweans. And soon after, we had those farm invasions. People were killed. More than 200 Zimbabwean blacks were killed during that period, and 8 white farmers were killed.
Okay.
That was the turning point.
All right. What would you say that Zimbabweans, or Zimbabwe as a country, has learned from nearly 4 decades of Robert Mugabe?
We've learned that today's democrats can be tomorrow's dictators. Who would have thought, if anybody had suggested to me that Mugabe would one day turn out to be an autocrat, I would have said, no, he was a Democrat. He was one man who believed in socialism. He was not corrupt himself, but towards the end, he was corrupt and he was a despot.
All right, Wilf Mbanga, thank you very much for joining us. I do appreciate your analysis.